Right with that. Go online and check it out and read it. It's oh my God, I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, most of us. So you know.
Oh.
My name is Tag.
Interesting.
Tag?
My given name is Timothy A. Gambatese, but I go by Tag. Kind of a nickname that stuck with me ever since I was a kid. The name of the firm I work for is Family Life Financial. We are a private firm. We specialize in federal employee benefits. We are financial advisors. We are registered. Yeah. Okay. We are registered, which means that you can look me up online and do what's called a broker check. If you look at the brochure that was handed out, there are a number of federal agencies that we work with or that we've been working with. So Postal isn't the only group we work with. However, the advantage to you and the people that we work with is the fact that we can sit down and advise. You all know, with the Human Resource Department being pulled out of all your local areas or local offices, there's a call center in North Carolina. That's your option right now when it comes to getting any retirement information, or if you've got questions, or if you have employees or people that work for you that ask you questions, there's a number to call. Same thing when it comes time to retire. Who's retired recently? Yeah, what did you do? Did you call up and you talk to somebody on the phone? Yeah. So you're going to make lifelong decisions off of a phone conversation. Spend 30 plus years with the organization, and you're going to be expected, well, amongst other things, to become a financial planner, essentially, because whose responsibility is that paperwork, ultimately? Yours. Why do you think they pulled the human resource people out? Because now here's another thing that is on your plate, amongst your jobs, and families, and other interests, and kids, and grandkids, and your life. So now here's just one more thing that you've got to take care of. And it isn't as simple as, hey, when I retire, I'm just going to sign my name and they're going to start sending me a check. Is it? Any of you that retired? How thick is that blue booklet that they send you?
This thing.
Looks like a telephone book, doesn't it? Larry, do you mind? That's what they look like. Oh, this will make it happen. However, everything that you need to know is not given to you. Okay? So that's why it makes things like this very important to get as much information. And I really appreciate the fact that Craig and everyone has allowed me to come here and speak to you. Because we used to do these workshops in conjunction with Human Resources, and they would do their presentation and then we would take off and do ours, and so it was a nice fit because we can talk about things that are getting into the nuts and bolts of the retirement system. That's why I handed you a packet, the actual forms that you're going to have to fill out at some point in time. And whether you're a week away or 2 weeks or months, years, it's good to have this information now because that will allow you to make educated decisions for your future. Okay? Because I don't know if any of you remember this, but there was an early out in 2009. They gave the people 30 days to make a decision. Now imagine if your financial house is not in order at that point in time. You've got 30 days to try to put everything together to make an educated decision, and not a decision based on emotion. Because I'll touch on emotion in a little bit and how that can affect our future. So retirement means success or failure based on your knowledge and your planning. But when you're not given all the information that you should have, what do? What did we do when we were hired in? We might have talked to some coworkers, you might have talked to the postmaster saying, hey, what do we do with this? What did you do? What do you sign up for? Okay, that sounds good. I'll do this, I'll do that. You know, and how can you plan for a future you can't predict? Think about it. Think of all the fear and the, we played a little APWU commercial as I was getting set up here about how all this money is being siphoned out of the post office, and Postmaster General is talking about, you know, 3,000 plus offices being closed at some point, cutting personnel and, you know, thinning and trimming. You know, now all of a sudden, we were looking at these jobs that we had a lot of security and a lot of stability. Now all of a sudden, we're not so sure anymore. And that can affect all the other things in our life also, decisions that we make. So, you know, getting as much information as you can is the best policy. Now, I'm not sure if any of you know, see, because if you really think about how we make our decisions, you know, I said when you first hired in, you might have talked to coworkers, gotten some information there. Right now, what formulates a lot of our information? The news, the media. Does the media give us a lot of good news? No. So here's some information that I'm not sure any of you really knew. As a FERS employee, okay, this applies to FERS. I'm going to be addressing FERS and civil service as I go here. So when there's something specific for civil service, I'll tell you. Specific for FERS, I'll tell you. Maybe I should have had you sit on either side of the room. But under FERS, there's 0.8% of your pay goes into the retirement fund. On the bottom right-hand corner of your check, that USPS retire value, that's your contribution to the retirement fund. That's 0.8% of your check. You pay 6.2% into Social Security, 1.45% into Medicare. So your total is 8.45%. Now here's what the civil service person pays in. They put in 7% into the retirement fund, 1.45% into Medicare. So that equals 8.45% also.
Will you repeat those again?
7% into the retirement fund, 1.45% into Medicare. Notice how, whether you're FERS or civil service, you're paying in the same amount. They're just going in different spots. But here's what the government's kicking in. For a FERS employee, they're putting in 12.9% into the retirement fund on your behalf. They're matching your Social Security at 6.2%. Medicare they match at 1.45%, and there's an automatic 1% going into the TSP. So it's costing the government 21.5% for a FERS employee. Civil service employee, they match the 7% that goes into the retirement fund and the 1.45% into Medicare. So it costs the government 8.45% for a civil service employee. So what does that tell you? It costs the government more for FERS employees than it does civil service. Now, civil service people, here's my question. Remember when there was an open season to transfer from civil service to FERS, 87, 1998. What were some of the reasons that we didn't transfer?
Not enough information.
Not enough information. Who trusted the government? That had to have been a better deal for them for us to transfer, right? But you know, now that you see this, you see that it actually costs the government more for a FERS employee than civil service. It's like, well, wait a minute. Because ultimately, what could end up happening in the future is, as a FERS employee, you're paying into Social Security. Guess what that makes you? More portable. So if there was a privatization situation some years down the road, make it a lot easier to transition. Because there's no private companies that would really want to take on that civil service pension or those annuities. And so that would be part of the reason that I would think. Now, is there anybody in the offset? Okay, so it's all straight civil service, straight first. Okay, good. Now, this just applies to civil service employees. 3 months before your birthday, you get a Social Security printout. It's on that green piece of paper. Civil service people, the amount that they're showing you at age 62, that they say that you should collect at age 62, you will not collect that because of the windfall elimination. That came back in the mid to late 80s where, because actually when a lot of you were hired, they said, no problem, you've got your Social Security quarters, you can collect your Social Security, and then when you retire, you'll get your civil service pension. But now what they did is they changed that rule, and they said that if you collect a pension in which you paid no Social Security tax, your Social Security will be penalized. They're going to use a modified formula to calculate that. So if you've got the minimum quarters, that's 40 quarters to collect Social Security, that's basically 10 years worth of work, that makes you eligible. Now I wouldn't discourage somebody from qualifying, but if you're trying to do some financial planning or some calculations as far as your income and your budget after you retire, don't use that age 62 amount. So it's pretty deceiving because Social Security doesn't know you're a federal employee and that you're paying into civil service or that you're a civil service employee. That gets, those computers communicate after you retire. When you go to collect, then they say, ooh, Social Security computer says, hey, OPM, and then all of a sudden, that's when things kind of kick in. So the maximum penalty for this year is $374.50. That's the maximum penalty. So if, for example, you're at age 62, you're eligible for $600, take $375 off it, just to be a round number. Okay? So beware of that. Civil service folks, you also have what's called the spousal offset, which means if your pension is too high, you may not, and you are eligible to collect Social Security, you may not, you may be disqualified from collecting off your spouse's Social Security. So that rule right there was one of the reasons why a lot of civil service people transferred into FERS. Because if you transferred from civil service to FERS, back when they had the open season, and you spent 5 years under FERS, you eliminated that spousal offset. So then now you'd be eligible to collect, if you had a spouse that had really good Social Security, you'd be able to collect off of them. Military. I talked to some guys from the military. How many guys had military service, active duty? Okay, quite a few of you. Under civil service, you automatically get credit for that time. And what I mean by credit is they'll add those years to your years of service. You do not have to make a payment for it as long as you will not receive any Social Security prior to age 62. For example, if I had a guy say that he's going to retire at age 55, he's got 30 years of service, I'm not going to pay my military deposit. Well, that's fine, but what are you going to do after age 55? Oh, I'm not going to work, I'm not going to this, I'm not going to that. And he's only a couple years away from collecting Social Security. Had 4 years of active duty in military. Now all of a sudden goes out and gets a part-time, gets bored. The retirement honeymoon wears off after, what, 6 months, a year. Then all of a sudden, goes and gets a job at a golf course or something part-time. Doesn't even realize it, but now he's paying into Social Security. So all of a sudden, you know, he's getting these Social Security printouts thinking, oh wow, cool, I'm going to collect Social Security at 62. But what happens? He gets to 62, they say, well, congratulations, you just applied for Social Security. Oh, by the way, since you're civil service, you've got a windfall elimination, so you're going to get penalized. And, ooh, since you didn't make a deposit for this military, those 4 years, you just lost 8% of your pension. You lose a heck of a lot more than what you pick up. So my advice for civil service employees, if there's any chance that you're close to collecting Social Security or that you may pay it, what you owe is 7% of what you made when you were in the military. And what we do is we contact the branch of service. So let's say you're in the Army, we contact the Army, find out how much money you made. And then once we get that information back, we send it to Shared Services with an application to make a deposit. So it's a two-step process. So I'd look into it, because what's happening is they're charging you interest on those payments. The interest that I've seen on buybacks today is probably double, you know, it's probably just as much as what the buyback would have been had you taken care of it right away, because they do give you the first couple of years of your career to pay it interest-free. But who's paying attention to that? You know, it might come across, or somebody might have said something about it, but hey, you know what, I got a full-time job now. You know, I've got other things that I'm worrying about. So under FERS, you automatically get credit, and you really need to pay it back. Your buyback is only 3% of what you made, plus interest. Okay? But from a credit standpoint, under civil service, all your years of service, basically it's a 2% credit towards retirement, and FERS it's 1%. So most of the buybacks that I've seen, oops, have I been clicking here without? Most of the buybacks I've seen are good deals. You know, when we work out the numbers, they turn out to be pretty good. So this is a copy of your pay stub, and I know all of you know where your annual leave is, your sick leave, your net pay, okay? And I believe I asked this question in Branson, and I don't know if anybody's going to remember this, but there was something that showed up on some of your pay stubs a while back. It's called insurance income. Right underneath your salary or your rate, you know, your annual salary right there, it would say insurance income. Anybody know what that is? Oh, no. But it has to do with that. Anybody? Take a stab? Yes?
Does it have anything to do with the basic life that you chose, some interest from that?
Well, yeah, it's, you know what, I'll give you one too. I'll buy you a cup of coffee. Sort of. It's close enough. What it is, the IRS will allow an employer to provide an employee a certain amount of what they call economic benefit. And right now that limit is $50,000 a year of economic benefit. So if your basic life, which you do get for free, remember, you get your basic life for free, that's your salary, rounded up to the next 1,000 plus 2. That's free. So if the value is over $50,000, it's basically a tax. But this is something that just showed up on your check. Nobody really said anything, did they? So, who are the first people that the government go after whenever they want something?
Federal employees.
There you go. There were some other changes that they made. Remember, they took off your Social Security number and they put on an employee ID number? Stopped showing you which funds you were contributing to in the thrift savings plan? Okay? So pay attention. Remember, Everything falls on your shoulders. That's, these are things that, this is my job, and we stay on top of this, and we pay attention to things like this. But, when the masses, when it affects everybody, that's when you guys, when things affect you, a lot of you don't realize it until when it's almost too late. When it's time to retire, it's like, oh, how come nobody ever told me about this? So, all right. Speaking of your FEGLI, how many beneficiary forms do you guys have at the post office? Holy cow, you said 4. I heard you first. Who else said 4? Wait, can you name them?
Yes. You know what? I took a retirement seminar.
Cheater. All right, here's beneficiary forms. The order of precedence, if something happens to you, they automatically go to your file and see if there's anything in your file that's been documented as far as beneficiary forms. Okay, that's the first thing they look for. But the order of precedent is, it goes to a widow or widower, and then it goes to your children, not stepchildren unless they're named. But it's good to have these on file. And if you're not sure, I would redo them. Because not everybody ends their career with the same person that they started their career with, possibly. So there may have been some changes. And you know where I'm going with that, okay? Or you may end your careers, let's say you're single. You might want your, well, I'll tell you what the forms are. There's one for your annual leave, okay? There's a beneficiary form for that. There's a beneficiary form for your contributions into the retirement fund. That bottom right-hand corner number on your check? That. There's one for the thrift savings plan. And then your life insurance. So that's the 4. Yeah, there's a beneficiary form. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. The forms are actually on OPM's website. It's opm.gov. They've got the beneficiary form. So there's one for your FEGLI, that's your life insurance, your thrift savings plan, your annual leave, I think they call it unpaid compensation, and your contributions to the retirement fund. Because those will and can get paid out. And I don't know, I haven't been on light blue in a while, but Larry, do you know if they're on light blue, or has anybody been on light blue lately? Okay. Okay, yeah, you have to go to the TSP website under forms and print that one off. Word of advice, when you fill out these beneficiary forms, you have to have 2 witnesses sign it. And these witnesses cannot be named as one of the beneficiaries. And if you do make a mistake on this form, do not white it out, do not cross it out, start over. Because if there's any mistake or anything like that, they will reject it and send it back to you. And be careful naming a minor child or grandchild as a primary beneficiary. Attorneys love probate. Attorneys charge anywhere from 3% to 10% of somebody's estate to go through this process. It can be very expensive. It can be very time-consuming. Okay, so if you name a minor, it automatically goes to probate. Well, trust, yes, I would suggest everybody has a trust. Or, and inside a trust, you'll have a will. Because let's say Craig goes home tomorrow, gets in an accident, some ice storm, and on his way to Kansas City, and he's just got a will. I can go to the courthouse And I can say, well, you know, Craig and I were just talking in Chicago, and he said that, you know, he's got this, let's say you've got a John Deere lawnmower. He said, I could have that. I could lay claim to something in his estate. Actually, I'd have to go, and I could go and look, and it'd all be listed. Because the will is public information. Your neighbors, anybody can go see what you had. See all the stuff that you had. And they can challenge. Not saying that anybody would, but it is public. If you have a trust, private. Nobody sees anything. So you typically, in a trust, they'll have power of attorney for your health care, power of attorney for your financial. You can have specific stipulations in there as to how you want things spread out after your demise. I like to call it ruling from the grave, because that's kind of what I want to do. Well, because we had a client in Wisconsin that had quite a bit of life insurance. She had 5 times her pay. She had a private life insurance policy, an 18-year-old son that was more interested in his band than going to school or, you know, taking care of business. And before we could get things set up, she passed away. And guess what happened? You know, here's this 18-year-old kid who got a $500,000 check. So what do you think he was doing? Yeah, he certainly wasn't listening to his aunt or whoever was taking care of him, or it was actually one of my dad's clients, but he wasn't listening to anybody. Guess how long the money lasted? Not even. Oh yeah, because the band went on tour. They started You know, we laugh. You know, we laugh about that, but, you know, these are all things to kind of get you thinking. Hey, you know what? Who do I have as a beneficiary? Yes.
Is a minor considered under 18?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, 18 is the magic age. You know, so a lot of this is to get you guys to start to think. If you are put in a situation where they offer you an early out and you've got 30 days, is your financial house in order? Can you make that decision on based on everything that you know, based on information that's in front of you, instead of making an emotion-based decision? Instead of saying, oh, well, you know, do we take it, do we not take it, can we afford to do this, can we do this? Yes, yes, no. You know, that's anxiety and fear that you don't need. You can avoid that. Now, as I said, this is your basic life insurance. You get 1 times your salary for free, round up to the next 1,000 plus 2. You can also buy additional, an extra 10,000, up to 5 times your pay, and up to $25,000 on a spouse, or $12,500 on a minor child. Now, we just did a quick calculation here where we took a 50-year-old, we took a 15-year period of time, from 50 to 65. This person, okay, they had a salary of $44,500. Over 15 years, from age 50 to 65, this person would, let's say it's me. I get to 65, I paid in $36,000 for this optional life insurance. 5 times my pay, you know, 1 unit on the spouse. Nothing happened to me. I'm going to retire at 65. Hey, Uncle Sam, you know, this is getting awfully expensive, because from age 50 to 55, the cost doubled. And then from 55 to 60, it doubled again. So then I say, hey, Uncle Sam, you know what? This thing's going up. It's expensive. I don't want to carry it. Oh, but by the way, that $36,000 that I kicked into the system, can I get that back? Absolutely not. So the advice here is, once you get to 50, If there's a need for you to continue life insurance, and you're healthy enough to qualify for it in the private sector, it may be time to look into that. Because this cost, we know through the government, is going to double once you get to 55. Double again once you hit 60. And you know what? The stuff sneaks up on you. Because what happens when you're, yes? You can reduce it. You can reduce it at any time. You just, once you drop it, you can't pick it up unless they have an open season or there's a qualifying event. So be careful. I did some stuff in Illinois for the federal prisons, and I heard about a company that went in to do a retirement workshop, and they were actually having guys sign the forms to drop their FEGLI coverage before they even went through a physical to get new insurance.
Oh, man.
Yeah, it's pretty silly, yeah.
Have they increased the minimum amount that you can have after so many years? Because for a long time it was just $5,000. Have they increased that yet? And that's looking out beyond. You just have basic.
If you got basic, they're just, they're covering your one-time your pay.
Well, it decreases every year for so many years. They just have a flat fee. And,
oh, this is after you retire.
after you
Yeah, I'm going to get to that in the packets that I handed out. I'm going to cover the options once we retire. So, good point. All right, TSP. The maximum you can contribute right now is $16,500. If you're 50 or older, you can put what's called a catch-up. That's $5,500. In order for you to do the catch-up, you have to be maxing out your thrift. You're going to be putting in the maximum. It's a lot of money. Under FERS, you guys get that automatic 1%. They match dollar for dollar on the next 3%, and then 50 cents on the dollar on the next 2. So basically what that means is you put in 5, they put in 5. If there are any FERS employees in here not putting in 5%, do it. You have to at least do that. And or if you know people that are under FERS that aren't doing it, get them to do it. Because that's free money. Did I say that? I mean, did I emphasize that enough to, okay. Oh, that's my accent. Now, I'm going to discuss a little bit about the funds that you have available to you. Because this is where it gets interesting. The G Fund. Basically a government, securities, it's a fund where they assign an interest rate. It's not tracking anything. And I'm not sure if anybody was aware, but the G Fund is the one fund that the government can go in and, exactly, they can take it and use that. So when they've got these spending bills and things that they're trying to pass, they use that money against the debt limit or level to bring it down. Same thing with Social Security. They use that money too. And they more or less there's IOUs. Not that you guys are going to see any difference on your statements or anything like that. It'll always show up there and it'll always show up the interest being credited. But that is the one fund. Because that's the one fund we all feel safe in, right? Now the F. So the F, the C, the S, and the I, they can't touch. So the F fund is fixed income securities, bonds, not necessarily associated with the stock market. In 2010, the G fund did 2.8%. In 2010, the F fund did 6.7%. That was the return. The C fund tracks the S&P 500. That's basically the largest 500 companies in the U.S. Last year, that did 15%. And the S, which tracks the Wilshire 4500 index, that's basically the 4,158 other companies besides the biggest 500. So you've got medium and small U.S. companies. That thing last year did 29%.
Okay. Lunch is ready, so may we break right here and continue with you?
Absolutely.
Good.
Absolutely.
What we'd like to do, because lunch is ready and we, unfortunately, we're a little late getting his presentation started. We're going to break for lunch, go to the atrium, come back, and he's going to pick up.
Okay.
And if that works for yours.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine.
We want the full presentation he has.
So, we left off in the thrift savings plan. I've given you information on the G, the F, and the C. The S, remember that S fund tracks the Wilshire 4500 index. And then the I fund, that tracks the EFI index. That's Europe, Australasia, and the Far East. So it's basically large international companies. Now there's another thing that the thrift savings plan came out with a few years back. And one of the reasons why they came out with them was because the thrift at the time felt that there was, who needed the, you needed one, right? Yeah, these are first. You guys need a couple? Do you mind? Do you mind handing a couple out here? And so what happened was there was so much money in the G fund that the director at the time felt that that's not a good place to be long term. Which was really interesting because that's where we felt the most comfortable in times of turmoil. So they came out with the L funds, and basically what they said was, you know, you leave it up to their managers. They'll pick and choose the stocks and make adjustments to the funds based on what they think is going to be going on. They called it outside market forces, and just leave it up to them and they'll take care of it. Well, the problem that I have with that is this. Let's say this entire half of the room wanted to be in the 2030 fund. Well, I know everybody's risk tolerance and definition of risk is going to be different. Okay, is there somebody else that need one? Everybody's risk tolerance is going to be different. Your time horizon as far as when you guys might need money out of the thrift will be different. And so now what they did is they just basically put together a cookie cutter approach to managing your thrift. Because it's the same thing. It's not like you could call them up and say, hey, you know, I've got a Roth IRA or this other investment out there where my spouse has a 401k and it's invested this way. Do you guys think you could tailor my thrift to that, or maybe make one plan complement each other? No, you can't do that. So it's better than nothing. And on the DVD they sent out, they even said that was one of their disclaimers, is that, you know, if you have a financial professional that you're talking to, or you've got other investments, you know, the L funds might not be that good for you. But if you're not doing anything, and the thrift is the only thing you're doing, and you don't have access to advice, then the L funds are pretty good. And that's something that that I help people do, because each and every person is different. Everybody's definition of risk is different. Everybody's time horizon is different. People are doing different types of investments. The thrift, what we've noticed, and what you all have probably noticed, is that as the money grows in there, what happens? What do we do when the market kind of starts to adjust? Yeah, we move it to the G. Why? Because our stomachs can't handle the risk. And the thrift is going to be a very important part of our retirement. So let's talk about the emotion and why it can hurt us. Yes?
Debbie Pagan, Northern Michigan. So what are you saying about the L funds? Are you giving us an under the cuff kind of advice here, or are you basically stating that we should be more active, or is it a safe bet? Because if you look at the breakout of the L fund, it does have your securities that are more, your risk is high when you have more years to go, and as you get closer towards your retirement, you get the lower risk and you get the more safe.
Right. What I'm saying is this. I'm not completely against the L funds. If you're not doing anything else, the L funds are good, okay? Because at least you're getting some type of management versus if I started my career and I put 50% in the G and 50 in the C, and I didn't do anything over the course of the last 15, 20 years, you know, I'm going to have a lopsided account. I'll probably have more money in the C fund than the G, which means now I'm exposed to more risk. The reason why I help people manage their thrift, and I'm about why I do it, is to manage the risk. Because I know the returns are going to come, and you need to have some money. Everybody needs to have some money. Percentages are going to be different in the C, the S, and I. You have to have some exposure there. As much as we feel that we don't want to, you know, take risk or this, the G fund earned 2.8%. What was the inflation last year? 3? Okay, so technically speaking, yes, you saw the value of your account go up 2.8%, but the purchasing power of that money lost value. So that's why you need to try to walk that line of saying, okay, let's try to stay at least ahead of inflation. And we know we're going to have some taxes on our thrift. So the L funds, you know, that's one option. So my personal preference is not to use them just because, you know, that's what I do, and I can advise and, you know, and help. Or if you have a financial planner that you're working with that understands the thrift and the funds, you know, then they might be able to better advise you based on knowing you and knowing other things that you're doing. So, does that help a little bit, or?
Yeah, I just was making sure that you weren't saying like get out of it or.
No, I'm not saying get out.
And, you know, do.
Now, what I was going to talk about, the emotions. Okay? So when things are left up to you, our guts tell us a lot. Let me take you back in time. 1990, let's see, what year am I going to go back to? 1992, 93, 94, 1995, C fund went up 37%. Pretty good, huh? 1996 went up 22%. 1997 went up 33%. And guess what? Guess who started chirping? Guess who started talking? All the coworkers who had money in the C fund, who for the last 3 years have had double-digit returns. Ooh, and I'm making all this money in the thrift, and oh man, this is just going to keep going up, and you should be a part of this. And all of a sudden we start thinking, well, I don't have all my money in that C fund. It did 33%, 22. Maybe I ought to do this, because why? Because we don't want to be left out, okay? It's our nature to want to do, we're creatures of, we want to avoid pain. We like pleasure. We want to gravitate towards things that make us feel better. And it's the same thing with our investments. Now all of a sudden, 1998 comes and you're at 20, you get a 28% return. And you're like, man, I'm getting into this. This thing's going to keep going up, double digits. We're getting online doing the financial calculators, calculating that we're going to have millions of dollars in the thrift and we're going to be able to retire early. And now all of a sudden it starts going in us. And so what do? We make the move. Because we don't want to be left out. So we make the move. 1999, what happens? Market goes up again, 20%. What are we doing? We're on the computer doing the calculations because now it's going to went up another 20%. So now this thing's going to keep going because this is the new paradigm. It'll never go down. Now all of a sudden, 2000. Market went down 9%. Not a big deal, because we're still ahead of the game. 2001 comes. Ooh, and what showed up on our statements in 2000 that we saw for the first time? Parentheses. We saw these parentheses around the numbers. And what did that mean? We're losing. Nobody wanted to be a loser or be... So, but you know what? It's okay because we were still ahead. 2001 goes down 21%, 2002 down 15%, and guess what happened then? That's when the pain sets in. And we're sick and tired of these parentheses around those numbers. And so what did we do? We sold out and put all our money in the G fund. Absolutely. Why? Because that's what made us feel better. So is that how you make money in the market? Sell low, buy high? We know this, right? We know that we're supposed to buy low, sell high, but our instincts and our nature take over. But I tell you, if we went into a department store, I know a lot of the ladies, you guys would find that clearance rack, 40, 50% off. We're all over that. We like deals there, but when there's a deal here, we don't want to touch it. All right, sorry about that. We don't want to touch that. But that's when we should. And that's one of the reasons why having the discipline and the ability to automatically rebalance your thrift savings plan on a regular basis during times when the market's up, during times when the market's down, what you're doing is you're selling high and buying low on a regular basis. It doesn't matter what's going on in the market. It doesn't matter, on the outside forces, price of oil, which government is defaulting on their debt. You set up a principle and you just automatically do it. And that's something that's going to make you very successful between now and the time you retire with your thrift, instead of just letting it ride. Because a lot of people are like, well, I took so much loss, I just want to leave it alone until it comes back. Well, there's no saying that it's going to come back. Because if you're not doing the right thing as of right now, at some point, do it. So, when we feel really good, when that market was up, that's when we were taking the greatest risks. And when the market was down 15, 20%, what I've been doing lately, I'll give you guys a little thing of what I've been doing. For people who are getting close to retirement and that don't want to take a lot of risk and feel that they don't want to have exposure to the market, I've been moving their existing money into safer accounts, and we've been taking their new contributions and we've been getting a little bit more aggressive with them. Because when the market goes down, that new money goes in, it buys cheap shares. That's a strategy that's been working pretty well. One of the provisions that the thrift savings plan allows you to do, I'm just going to talk about distributions of the thrift, because once you retire, my advice is to get the money out of the thrift. Roll it over. You can tax-free roll it over into an IRA, and at that point you have control of it. Your distribution options are much greater and much more flexible than taking distributions from the thrift. And you can also do what's called an in-service age-based withdrawal. So once you're 59 and a half, you can take your entire account balance out and roll it over into an IRA. One of the strategies that a lot of FERS employees use, why they do that, is because the thrift won't, after you retire, they wait 30 days before they do anything with your thrift. So if you get it out ahead of time, then you can have access to it right away. Because remember, after you retire, you're supposed to get 3 months of interim checks. Though that's more like 6 to 9 months now, where they give you about 75, 80%. So you may need some access to money beforehand. Roth IRA, everybody should have a Roth. 1997 is when they started this. It's a way where you can put money into an IRA. It's going to grow tax-free, and you pull it out tax-free. All the interest, the earnings, your contributions, everything comes out, God bless you, everything comes out tax-free. The maximum you can put into a Roth IRA this year is $5,000. If you're age 50 or over, you can do an extra $1,000, so you can go up to $6,000. And I was corrected on the thrift. The maximum that you can put in the thrift savings plan next year is $17,000. So it wasn't $16,500. So thank you. What's nice about the Roth is it stays out of your estate. There's no tax reporting. If you named somebody as a beneficiary, then they would get tax-free money for the rest of their life. A lot of people are using Roth IRAs for estate planning. So it's a good vehicle to use. Now, I've got an annuity estimate here. Annuity estimates that they mail out to you were basically designed for civil service employees. They don't help FERS employees that much, because FERS employees are entitled to what's called an annuity supplement. So if you retire as a FERS employee prior to age 62, you can get supplemented until you get to 62. So the government will supplement you with a portion of your Social Security. The way you figure that out is you take your years of service as a federal employee, divide it by 40, and then multiply it by 1,000. That's how you can kind of calculate what you would get between, so let's say I go out at 58, so from 58 to 62. Then at 62, that supplement would drop off and I'd pick up my Social Security. Nowhere on this annuity estimate does it show anything about the annuity supplement. So the annuity estimate basically shows you, too, it's an estimate based on a future date. So they take the pay period that they printed that. And so all your information as of that pay period, so sick leave, everything is just as of that date. So you're going to be earning some annual leave and sick leave beyond that that you need to take into consideration. Because they only give you credit for years and months towards your retirement. Any days left over, you lose. So what does that mean? But you didn't hear that from me. Don't take advantage, but excuse me. The annuity supplement formula, you take your years of service as a federal employee, you divide it by 40, and then you multiply that. It'll be like a 0.65, 0.7 times 1,000. That'll be your monthly estimate.
We could do that.
Okay, so it also shows how they're calculating your high 3. Remember, your high 3 is calculated by your highest 3 consecutive years. Okay? It's not necessarily always your last, but it's your high 3 consecutive. And then it also gives you 2 options here, with or without survivor benefits. If you guys open up your packet, the packet that you got handed out, that front cover page, basically what we're going to run through that real quick, because this is the retirement paperwork. Whether you're civil service or FERS, that front page has to be initialed on the left. And what happens is, the date that you pick, for civil service, you're going to want to retire on the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd of the month. And as a FERS employee, you're going to want to retire at the end of the month, because your annuity will begin the very next day if you're under FERS, and same thing with civil service. So if I retire on the 2nd of January as a civil service employee, my retirement begins the very next day, the 3rd. And same thing with FERS. If I go December 31st, effective date is on the 1st. So don't, so if your birthday is in the middle of the month, don't retire on your birthday. Or you can stop working on your birthday and use annual leave or sick leave for the end of the month, but make sure it's one of those times. Now, under FERS, so go to the next page. I'm going to address FERS right now. The main decision that you have to make is at the bottom, where it says annuity election under D. There's 3 options right there. One is I choose a reduced annuity, this is the one that gives you the maximum survivor benefit for a spouse. That's the option that they show you on your annuity estimate. That's the one that's going to cost you 10% of your pension. So if I have a $1,000 a month pension, it's going to cost me $100 a month to provide my spouse with a $500 a month survivor benefit. The option right underneath that is a reduced one where that cost to me is half. Okay? So what will happen is if I have a $1,000 a month pension, cost me $50, she'd get $250 a month if I die as a survivor benefit. The main issue with survivor benefits is the health insurance. Because the rule says you have to take a survivor benefit in order for a spouse to continue the health insurance if something happens to you after you retire. So so if the spouse is on your health insurance, you have to take one of those two options. If you take anything less than that top option up here, the spouse has to sign off on it. And I'll show you, I've got one of those pages coming in there. Because if you take something, if I have two people that are postal, husband and wife, I don't take any survivor benefit. So then I'd have them sign here. Now if you go to the third page, I'm going to try to cover, the next two pages there's not real big decisions that need to be made on there. Now I'm going to address civil service, survivor benefit. Now you guys look at your second page. See down here where it says Section D, annuity election? Human resource people, when they used to give you 1 hour on the clock training session, one-on-one, what they would do is this. They'd have that page sitting in front of you and they'd say, well, Louis, do you want to take a survivor benefit for your spouse? If something happens to you, if you said, if Louis was like, no, let her go out and get a job. Then what they would say is, hey, Louis, is she on your health insurance? And you'd say, well, yes. Then they would say, well, you need to take the survivor benefit in order for her to continue the health insurance if something happens to you. Then Louis would say, all right, fine. And then they would point right to this box right there and have him initial right there. And he just chose the maximum survivor annuity for his spouse, which is going to cost him the most. And that's the one option that they show him on his annuity estimate. So if he didn't know any other option, hey, this is what they're showing me. This is my option. But what he could do right next door is he could initial there and put in a different dollar amount. Think about this. Let's say you're a civil service employee. Survivor benefits are going to be in the $200 to $400 a month range. So let's say it's $300 a month. That's $3,600 a year that you're spending to provide the spouse with a benefit. That's $72,000 over 20 years. And let's say at that 20-year mark, you're on a cruise, or you're, skiing in Colorado, and spouse accidentally goes down, starts tumbling, dies. And you say, hey, hey, Uncle Sam, I spent $72,000. Say, you rebuked me on the FEGLI, I spent all that money, didn't get that back. Now I kicked in $72,000 to the system for the survivor benefit. You think you'll get that back? No, you won't. So there are alternatives that you can do, okay? But it just takes a little planning. Just be aware of this. You have options, okay? You don't have to necessarily take the options that they give you. And the rule says you just need to take a survivor benefit. You don't need to take the full survivor benefit in order for the spouse to continue the health insurance.
So you can say $5 a month.
Yeah, absolutely. As long as the spouse will sign off on that. And if you go to the 3 pages, see where it says spouse consent to survivor election? See here, this is for civil service. There you go. You've got underneath on box A, number 2, that's where you write in the amount. And then you have the spouse sign it, you get it notarized, and then you're good. But I'd have, to make sure that there was other means to provide for the spouse if something were to happen to you. Now, certified summary of service. When you get your blue booklet, about a week later, you're going to get another mailing. And that's going to, at the top will be an RTR plan correction report. Those are the dates that the Postal Service is using for your start date or any military time you had or part-time service or FICA time. You do not want to lose that because that needs to go back along with your paperwork. So then here's the next page is the signature page where you sign off on that saying that yes, this RTR plan correction report is correct. You include that in your packet. You also want to include a marriage certificate if you're married. So don't forget that either. And if you were in the military, your discharge papers. If you had any buybacks, you want to include the information that you received when you made that buyback because you want to make sure that you're getting credit for it. And then if you look at the next page, that's your W-4 for withholding. And then the life insurance. This is the last one. Your basic life, remember you get that for free? You're going to have to make a decision on how you want to continue that into retirement. The annuity estimates show you now the 75% reduction. What that means is your basic life, you'll get, if you take the 75% reduction, that's your first option up here, you will get your basic life until age 65. Once you turn 65, they stop taking the payment off your retirement check, and it's now free. But your basic life starts to reduce by 2% per month until it reaches 1/4 of its value per month. So basically by the time you're 70, it'll be worth 1/4 of its original amount, but it's free. Okay? If you want to continue more than that, you can do the 50% reduction, but you're going to continue paying that for the rest of your life. 0% reduction means you're going to pay even more. Okay? So know your options.
That's what I was asking about earlier, about the minimum, what is the absolute minimum? And you said 1/4, but under 1/4, is there like a dollar amount?
No, it'll be automatic. It'll be automatic on there. So you won't dictate the dollar amount. Now, there's a checklist that I can get you, email you, send to you. It's called Are You Ready for the Future? Basically, it's it's important papers and contract birth certificates, wills, trusts. It's kind of like you guys doing, when you get your financial house in order, putting everything together and having someone know where all your stuff is so that if something happens to you, there's not a situation where stuff's left behind or that they can't find anything. So we also have a website, the gtgwealth.com or flfs.com. You can, we've got information on our website. I've got some business cards. All of you have those brochures on the back, are little things you can fill out. If you guys want some information or you want to talk to me, I'll be here for the rest of the day, but you can fill that out too. No, you can have as many as you want.
Now, somebody else said that if you were a part-time regular, they got their annuity and it didn't reduce what when you're part-time or you're not working up 40 hours? So
yeah. After 1986, if you had PTM time and you weren't working 40 hours a week, you weren't getting full credit. So they'll prorate your pension. Just for those years. So that's something that we look into, and we can calculate that. We look at your work history and the number of hours, and we do the math on that. But yeah, that's good. It's good to know. Yes.
If you take the first supplement prior to age 62, does that reduce what your Social Security would have been had you not taken it?
No, because that supplement comes from the government. It doesn't come from Social Security. So it doesn't really affect it other than the fact that you're not earning money anymore that's being reported. So it doesn't affect it, per se.
Okay, I have a question. What if you're not eligible for full Social Security benefit until 65 or 67?
Well, you can still collect a reduced benefit at 62, which if you retire prior to that, you know, they'll automatically supplement you. You don't have to collect at 62. You could put it
But
off.
the supplement stops at 62.
Yeah.
Whether you take that or choose to wait till
Right.
65.
Right. Yeah, they'll shut it down.
That supplemental annuity is monthly
Yes, that's correct.
and it doesn't matter, it's up until the age of 62?
Yes.
For first employees, at your minimum retirement age, I think it's 56 or something, you would only get the 1%, then you're eligible to get your TSP at 59.5. So from 59.5 to 52, you're living off of 1/4 or 1/3 less your income. I think a lot of people don't know that.
Oh,
In the
that there's
first
a.
arena, that we're 3 tiered, so you have to be prepared. And what are you going to do during that time period?
Right, right. Yeah, and that's all, you know, looking at your options and making sure that you've got that, you're prepared for that. And that's what a lot, you know, by getting all the information that you can and, you know, sitting down with somebody that can explain all that to you is important. So, you know, you've gone through it, right? So you can speak firsthand. You know, testimonial right there. Yes.
Did you say about what you were saying? For first employees, you get your 1% at your minimum retirement age, which is 56 and something months. So you can't get your TSP until you're 59.5. So you got from 56 to 59.
Well, there is a way you can get money out of the TSP prior to 59.5. There is, and avoid the penalty. It's called a 72T distribution. The IRS allows us to do that, but it's where you have to take equal substantial payments for 5 years or until you turn 59.5, whichever is longer. So yeah, I mean, there is a way where we can do that, but you know, like I said, it all depends on. Yep, absolutely. So, yes.
The payment plan, once you agree to that, you cannot change that, is that correct?
Right. Once you initiate the 72T, yeah, you can't dictate what you pull out of there. So I want to thank everybody. I know I'll be here for the rest of the day. If anybody's got other questions, I'll be out. I've got time.
Thank you, Jay. We appreciate it.
Thanks.
Folks, our next presentation is getting set up right now, is for Branch 23 out of Detroit, the great state of Michigan, who are vying for the 2016 National Convention. So please don't leave the room. It'll take just a second to set up their presentation, and then we're going to let them present all the information they have.